There's an uncontested fact that Lindsay Clancy killed her children. That is admitted.
Correct.
I don't like to second guess the way lawyers present their case, but they're laying out this motive that I just don't think the jury is going to buy. Hi, I'm Misty Marris, and like everyone out there on the internet, on TikTok, and on social media, I have been watching every second of the Lindsay Clancy trial. I'm a lawyer, I'm looking at it from the legal perspective, and I've been watching it gavel to gavel and breaking down the case every day. This case has resonated with so many people, with so many strong opinions about what this case is, what it stands for, and what's going on in the courtroom. Lindsay Clancy was a mom from Massachusetts, had 3 children, Cora, 5 years old, Dawson, 3 years old, and Callan, 8 months old. On January 24th, 2023, she admits to strangling her 3 children with exercise bands in the basement of her home. She then attempted suicide by cutting her wrists and her throat and jumping out a second-story window. The narratives in this case are really different between the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution says this was a calculated, premeditated murder, whereas the defense says she was in the throes of psychosis and shouldn't be held criminally responsible. I'm going to take you through this and talk about some of the key moments in the trial, starting with opening statements. What do the prosecution and the defense want the jury to look at and listen to? Remember, the jury, it's a jury of her peers. So these are people who are coming in with their own life experience and common sense. That means there's likely polarized opinions in that jury room, like we've seen play out on social media, and people that have followed this trial and have so many passions about it one way or the other. There's no reason to think the juries aren't thinking the same way. So what are they seeing? What is the evidence? And what do the prosecution and the defense want the jury to focus on? To break that down, I want to bring in my friend, my partner in covering crime, and my colleague, NBC correspondent Stephen Romo. We've been covering this together pretty much every single day. And the facts of this case are so heartbreaking. It's really difficult. It's difficult to watch on the court feed. It's been difficult for those that we know are in the courtroom. And I can only imagine it's been really difficult for the jury.
Yeah, it has to be. Just covering it from a journalist's point of view, hearing those details, you get bogged down sometimes in timelines and medication dosages, but it's really easy to snap back into and remember the 3 children that were lost in all of this. The details can sort of get in the way of that sometimes, but you really come back down to earth once you remember those 3 little ones.
Yeah, and I think that's really such a good point, because that's one of the reasons why opening statements are so incredibly important in a case like this, where it's been weeks. There's been so many people, so many witnesses that took the stand, and you're talking about people that were in Lindsay Clancy's life, as well as medical professionals and experts. So all of that can seem really overwhelming. So one of the reasons that opening statements are the first thing a jury hears is so they have a roadmap. What are they going to listen to during the course of the trial? What should they listen for that relates to both sides of the case? So it's important to say it's not evidence. The jury doesn't go back to the room and say, well, the prosecutors told me XYZ during the opening statement, so I find her guilty or not guilty. But it really lays out what each side is going to prove, and it's important that that side comes through. Whatever they say, you can't unring that bell. And I think, Stephen, I would love your opinion on this, in this particular case, it's almost more important. And I say that because you're talking about a case where there's an uncontested fact that Lindsay Clancy killed her children. That is admitted. What is the number one question on the jury's mind? And they've gone through jury selection, so they know what the case is about. It's why.
The why is so important, and I think this could be one of the cases where maybe it was decided in jury selection. So many people just that I'm encountering online and in my everyday life who have questions about this are asking those same questions about how this could happen, how a mother could do this, or if you think she actually did this. And that's a whole other topic. But the strong feelings for the mental health care system in the country, as well as just how this case has been handled. You hear all the doctors that Lindsay ended up seeing, all the mental health care providers, and yes, the prescriptions that she was given. But going back to those opening statements, I listened to them today, and it's interesting after all of these witnesses to go back and read some some of the things that prosecutors said in opening statements, and did they actually show that with evidence? Some of it, I don't know that they did.
All right, so let's go back and talk about that. I want to talk about the broad theme. So we had ADA Shannon Buckingham. So she gave the prosecution's opening statement, and I would say there was about 3 major themes that I pulled out listening to the opening statement. And the first was the children, which of course, focusing on the children, what they were like, what their likes were, their demeanor, just these innocent children who were the victims here. Then there was a lot of focus on that day, January 24th, 2023, bringing the jury through a timeline from the morning through the killings to the aftermath, right? All of that, and really come out the gate talking about the horrific nature of that scene that we can only envision because we did not get to see those photographs as the public. They were on embargo, so we didn't see a lot of that. And then theme number 2 was something that prosecutors actually do not have to do. They don't have to tell you motive. Something that I think is interesting is that prosecutors need to prove every element of a crime, but motive is not one of those elements. So they have to prove, in this case, premeditation, intent, and sometimes motive is used to do just that. But prosecutors laid out a motive in this case. And I want to remind you and remind the audience about some of what they laid out. So they said Lindsay Clancy was a classic overachiever, that she'll look like in photographs and in testimony, a doting mother and a dedicated nurse. But behind the scenes, she was controlling, manipulative, and that at some point after she didn't have a nanny anymore and she had the 3rd baby and life got really hard because she lost control. She could no longer control the day-to-day. Everything's playing down to the minute with her. And when that happens, she no longer, this is a direct quote, she no longer wanted the life she thought she did. And so she made the calculated and selfish decision to kill herself and to kill the children because nobody could take care of them the way that she could. So that was a large theme for prosecutors, setting out that motive. And then the third piece was what we call malingering. Now, lawyers can never use normal words. We always have to use a term that,
a little fancier.
Yes. But this is exaggerating a health condition or fabricating a health condition. So here, prosecutors said you're going to hear a lot of information about mental health, but actually, she was doctor shopping. She was manipulating doctors by not telling them the full picture. She was acting differently than the things she was saying she was experiencing, and that she dealt with her mental health in the worst possible way by always trying to find the easy way out. Prosecutors, in their opening statement, I think they overshot. This is my impression after watching all of the evidence play out. I think they might have been better off going with, all you need to decide, jury, is what happened on January 24th, 2023, during this limited period of time where Lindsay Clancy admits to killing her 3 children. It happens in this time span. In order for it to happen in this time span, there's no point in time where cold water is splashed in her face and she's saying, what am I doing? And lean into, yes, she might have had mental illness, but that doesn't mean that she has no criminal responsibility under the law. Did she know right and wrong? And focusing on those facts, instead of saying she's exaggerating her mental illness when there's a mountain of evidence that she was seeking treatment, a mountain of medical records, and instead of laying out this motive that I just don't think the jury is going to buy. And my theory is, and I don't like to second guess the way lawyers present their case, but they knew the defense was going to come out with this story that people were going to understand. A lot of people have had negative experiences with healthcare. Mental illness is an issue that permeates society. And they said, well, we need to have a counter narrative. But my question to you is, did they overshoot that? Did they lay out something that they did not deliver in the opening?
I don't know, overshoot, but I don't think that they backed up what the story, the counter narrative that they tried to lay out. I understand the impulse to have a counter narrative, but I wonder if instead leaning in to just the facts, the timeline, Lindsay calling this takeout place that's a bit farther away, the one that they have not been to before for takeout, to send Patrick a little farther away. Just stick to those details to lay out the story instead of talking about how she's controlling, meticulous, and manipulative, particularly when their own witnesses were not backing up those adjectives to do with Lindsay.
Right. Classic overachiever. What? I don't think that that really lands. I think that it's going to be tough for the jury to hear that and their takeaway in opening statements where they're going to look at the evidence through what prosecutors told them they would see. I think you lose a little credibility on that front. Now, that doesn't mean that prosecutors don't have enough with regard to their case because of that legal standard. Did she know what she was doing was wrong, or could she not control herself? That's the standard. But what are we talking about from penalties perspective?
Yeah, that is one of the most fascinating things. We originally talking about first-degree murder compared to a lack of criminal responsibility, which is a wide range. Now, a second-degree murder also on the list. That first-degree murder, though, is life in prison without the possibility of parole. And Lindsay Clancy is 36 years old. That could be quite a long time that she's in prison, which makes sense when you hear the defense's strong appeal that she was not in her right mind when she did that.
Yeah, lack of criminal responsibility. That would be no jail time, but it would be institution. It's not like she goes free. She would be institutionalized.
Correct.
Now let's talk about the defense opening statement. This is Kevin Reddington, and he is a very well-known, high-profile lawyer in Massachusetts. You know, he's known for representing all of these high-profile clients, taking on these really difficult cases, career defense attorney. A lot of people talk about his tattoos, never represent an informant and bring it on. So he is really, really commanding in the courtroom, and he comes out the gate, he points at the district attorney, and he says, the district attorney brought this knowing it would destroy Lindsay Clancy's soul, and puts a lot of accountability on the district attorney for even bringing the case into the courtroom. And then he goes through a very detailed timeline of Lindsay Clancy having her third child, being very happy, everything's great, till about September of 2022, when she starts to experience anxiety because she has to go back to work. She doesn't want to leave her third baby. She's got 2 other little ones at home. And then putting up in a very old school, you know, he's someone after my own heart because he doesn't use the computer, he doesn't use slides, he doesn't use exhibits. He has poster boards.
He does.
Of all the medications she was on, 30 prescriptions of 13 different psychotropic medications, all the different doctors that she's seen. And he describes a mental health decline throughout that time that gets exacerbated in November, December of 2022. All of these doctors and hospitals, suicide helpline that she went to, that she was seeking help from, did not get the help she needed, all culminating in what they say is a state of psychosis, a voice that she hears on January 24th, 2023. After that, he shows a picture of her in the hospital in, you know, just every medical device you can imagine. But he doesn't stop there. He actually goes into the aftermath, and he jumps right in, even though prosecutors didn't mention it in their opening, to Lindsay Clancy's suicide attempt, which throughout the trial, prosecutors have couched as something that maybe wasn't a real suicide attempt, that she was faking it to either gain sympathy or to cover up her crime. But Reddington goes right into it, and he says not only did she try and commit suicide that day, not only are we going to put on experts who are going to tell you that it was so severe, it was like Christopher Reeves being thrown off a horse, that that's the type of injury she sustained. But to this day, she still doesn't want to be alive. To this day, she knows what she did, and she does not want to be alive. And that's something that we saw play out in the evidence as well, with her doctors, with medical records and notes that say she's basically under 24/7 surveillance because she's a suicide risk. Those are the arguments. Now let's talk about what we saw come out during the trial. Let's start with that motive that prosecutors laid out, because I always say, the prosecutors hold the burden of proof. So these are themes, these are not necessarily evidence, but what did you see as we saw those witnesses take the stand about Lindsay Clancy and that controlling, manipulative side that prosecutors promised we would see throughout the trial?
Yeah, after opening statements from the prosecutors, I really was expecting more of that theme of, I think they said she was controlling, meticulous, and manipulative. And each of these prosecution witnesses that we saw brought up told a different story. I think the prosecutors tried with the nanny, Elaine Rossi, to get her to say she was there from September until December 10th of 2022, and she was making food for the children, putting them down for naps, and she and Lindsay would write back and forth in this journal of the care for the kids. And she did not agree with any of the prosecutor's questions about Lindsay being overly controlling. She seemed to think it was reasonable that Lindsay wanted the food cut up into small bite-sized pieces because she was worried about her children choking. That did not strike Elaine Rossi, the nanny, as being overly controlling.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because I could really hear when prosecutors were asking the question, oh, so she wrote down he has to go to sleep from this minute to this minute to that minute to that minute, and you need to cut up the sweet potatoes and all of these things. And then asked the nanny, who's been a nanny for many other families. I mean, she was doing this for a long time. She had joined the Clancys that year, but she had been with other families before. Is this? Didn't you find that to be controlling? Wasn't that a bit over the top? And the nanny said, no.
No, she found it normal.
Another witness I thought was interesting, and by the way, I want to point out that these were prosecution witnesses that we're talking about right now, who kind of came off, and as I was watching, I thought, are these character witnesses for the defense? Because every single person said she was a loving mother until she began to suffer, and even through that time that they saw somebody who was loving and caring.
She was described as a loving mother, a doting mother, a caring mother, all of these adjectives from these prosecution witnesses about what a good mother that she was and how she wanted to take care of her kids. Even this doctor's appointment that she had for Cora, her daughter, just before the killings actually happened. She's taking her to the doctor, trying to follow through. That information, a lot of it coming from prosecution witnesses.
Yeah, I thought one other interesting witness was Christopher Clancy, who's Patrick Clancy's father. And again, they talk about this incident on Thanksgiving where Dawson, who he described as being a little silly, that Lindsay had to kind of rein him in and get him to sit down. And the prosecutor is sort of trying to make that into a big thing, right? And him saying, no, there was really not anything to talk about. It really wasn't a big deal. So that was a bit more in line with the defense narrative.
Yeah, I found that same conclusion. He's the grandparent, one of the grandparents of these children who are gone, and it is now his ex-daughter-in-law who's on trial for this. And he was saying things that sounded like he was defending her. He sounded like a defense witness in that situation, saying that it was normal. I mean, Dawson was 3 years old. Reining him in from acting silly did not sound like a mother who was out of control, who was at wit's end. It did not strike that way.
When I listen to it, I'm thinking there's probably parents on this jury. And are they going to see these instances that were characterized as really controlling? And is that going to land with them as far as a motive that this mother, who by all accounts, including the prosecution's own witnesses, was a doting, loving, caring mother who one day made the calculated decision to fabricate mental illness and kill her kids because it was her only way out? I don't know, but let's take the flip side, because I don't want to talk about the expert witnesses because that gets a little bit too complicated.
Right.
But that idea of the kind of feigning or exaggerating mental health issues and taking the easy way out when it came to treatment. What was your impression on the evidence with regard to that point the prosecution brought up in openings?
Yeah, the idea of doctor shopping. I don't think they actually used the term doctor shopping, but it was definitely the idea that she's going doctor to doctor, getting different medications. When you actually hear from witnesses, particularly Patrick Clancy, and then we also heard from Lindsay's mother and mother-in-law about how she was struggling, told each of them that she had been struggling and sought treatment in different ways. And when one treatment didn't work the way she wanted it to, or one medication didn't, she tried something else. And those medications, we've heard so much from prosecutors about that she wasn't taking all the medications at the same time. But then we hear from the defense that you just hear the list, the poster board full of medications. And you can just imagine, so many people have used the SSRIs, Prozac type medications, and know that they take a while to work and they take a while to wean down from. I don't know if it was necessarily effective to say that she's doctor shopping when she's going person to person asking for help.
I think the word that got me was the word easy. Easy way. I saw something that was anything but easy. That being said, we got to remember the defense case, the defense laid out this timeline. I think they told a really good story, but some of the evidence, she's never heard an auditory hallucination before. That there had never been other instances of psychosis. It's only during this one really finite period that day. Obviously, that's going to be the focus of the prosecution. Now, keep in mind, there's a time, and it's going to be, what are we really talking about here? It's not the mental illness and a diagnosis of a mental illness that rules the day, even if that's psychosis and even if that's voices. The standard for lack of criminal responsibility. Did she know what she was doing was wrong, or could she not control her actions? So we'll be keeping an eye on this, and we'll be watching for what the jury does with this. Not an easy case for the jury to deliberate.
No, it sounds so impossible. Talking to people about this case, you're trying to figure out what was going on in Lindsay Clancy's mind at the time that these killings happened. And with this testimony, with these ideas of medication, still it all really comes down to what each juror believes. Maybe what they believed going in played a big role in that, certainly did for jury selection, but will they buy that she didn't know the difference between right and wrong when she had those exercise bands down there in that basement?
Thank you so much, Stephen. There's so much in this case to break down. The jury heard testimony from family and friends, medical providers, experts. Make sure to continue to follow because we'll walk through them all here.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.